In this lesson, we're going to cover vendor assessments. Now, a vendor assessment is an essential process that organizations implement to evaluate the security, reliability, and performance of external entities that they rely upon. In today's interconnected business landscape, a weak link in one vendor can have reverberations across multiple businesses and lead to widespread vulnerabilities and potential data breaches. Now, first, let's classify the primary entities that are often under the purview of vendor assessment. This includes vendors, suppliers, and managed service providers, known as MSPs. Now, vendors are typically businesses or individuals that provide goods or services to an organization. Think of software providers like Microsoft or Oracle, which your organization might rely on for an enterprise solution. Next, we have suppliers. And suppliers are typically going to be involved in the production and delivery of products or parts of products. For instance, a computer manufacturer might have multiple suppliers, with one providing processors, another providing memory, another providing hard drives, and things like that. Now, finally, we have MSPs, known as managed service providers. These are going to be hired by a company to manage IT services on behalf of your company. Now, a good example of an MSP or managed service provider would be a cloud service provider like AWS or Google Cloud, and they're going to be used to manage vast data infrastructures so your organization can instead focus on their core competencies. Now, one vital aspect of the vendor assessment process is penetration testing of your suppliers. Penetration testing is essentially a simulated cyber attack against your supplier systems to check for exploitable vulnerabilities. Let's imagine your company sources its software from a third-party developer. Penetration testing the software would mean attempting to find and exploit vulnerabilities just like an actual cyber attacker would in order to attempt their own attacks against your network. Now, if a vulnerability is found, this is an indication that the software could be a risk to your organization's cybersecurity posture. Our goal with conducting a penetration test is really to validate that our service provider or vendor is taking their own cybersecurity posture seriously, since their risks could become your risks once you install their software into your network. Now, when conducting your vendor assessments, one part of that is to review your contract with the vendor or service provider. When you're reviewing the contract, you should verify that you have a right to audit clause included inside of that contract. Now, this right to audit clause is going to grant your organization the right to evaluate the vendor's internal processes and ensure that they are in compliance with the agreed upon standards. For instance, if a company contracts a data management firm to handle its customer data, the right to audit clause would allow the company to periodically inspect that data handling, storage, and protection practices of the given vendor you've selected. Now, this isn't about a lack of trust, but rather a method to ensure transparency and make sure that they are adhering to the best practices. Remember, inside of cybersecurity, we always want to trust but verify. Now, another element that instills confidence in vendor security is evidence of internal audits being conducted. An internal audit refers to a vendor's self-assessment where they evaluate their own practices against industry standards or organizational requirements. For example, a cloud service provider might regularly audit its data protection measures to ensure that encryption protocols are up to date and effectively implemented. Now, when a vendor can present evidence of consistent and comprehensive internal audits, this does serve as a testament to their commitment to security and quality. Now, while internal audits are commendable, they may sometimes be insufficient, especially if you're lacking the rigor involved with them. This is where the need for an independent assessment will come into play. Independent assessments are evaluations conducted by third-party entities who have no stake in the organization or vendor's operations. Think about this as a neutral party who's going to be coming in to make sure the vendor is adhering to the security or performance standards that you both have agreed to. Let's consider there is a data center that houses critical information for multiple organizations. An independent body like the International Organization for Standards, or ISO, might assess the data center's practices against its global standards to ensure they're meeting or surpassing the benchmarks. This third-party validation is going to be invaluable for organizations who aim to minimize their exposure to risk. Finally, in our discussion of vendor assessments, we can't overlook the importance of conducting a supply chain analysis. A supply chain analysis is going to be used to dive deep into a vendor's entire supply chain and to assess the security and reliability of each link. It is an acknowledgement of the fact that the vendor security is not just about their practices, but also encompasses their entire supply chain's integrity. Now, for example, a hardware vendor might source parts from various global locations. A thorough supply chain analysis would then scrutinize each of these source locations to ensure there is no risk of counterfeit parts or tampered products entering into your supply chain. So remember, in today's interconnected businesses and global supply chains, the security and reliability of our vendors will directly impact our organization's own well-being and security. While trusting our partners is essential, actively ensuring their adherence to top-notch standards is also equally as important, as we need to ensure that we conduct a vendor assessment, a contract review, a penetration test, and other internal or external audits to validate that our suppliers and vendors are remaining in compliance with the security requirements that are contained within our service contracts.